Greetings and welcome to week 6 of CIS 4710 Information Security. I am Dr. Brown, and this week our lecture is going to be on the Chapter 7 slides. So we're going to get those opened up. This weekend lecture, we're going to start looking at your project. So it's kind of a light week with no homework due, no lab due. We have going to concentrate on getting some things done with identifying what type of vulnerabilities you want to put in your target vulnerable machine. Okay, but we've been going through the steps of a pen test of the hacking cycle, if you will. And this week we're going to look at system hacking. So with system hacking, you're going to look at how you can use all that information you have collected to this point and put it together into an attack plan. All right, so you'll see how you can use all that information to proverbially kick down the door of a system and carry out your attack. So just a quick review, how did we get here? Well, we've gone through the footprinting, we've gone through things such as finding information, collecting it passively, getting information such as phone numbers, addresses, employee names, job information, IP blocks, domain names, things of that nature. After that, we went on to the active side and started scanning, ping sweeps, port scans, tracing, gathering information from registries such as WhoWiz, IANA, Aaron, etc. And then we've gone through the enumeration step where we looked at um, usernames, username formats, group information, domain information, potential passwords, shares. We've gone through the TCP, UDP port scans, gone through the vulnerability scans, looked at what operating systems they're running, what applications they're running, and started to tick off and do the deep dive into what is potentially vulnerable. At this point in time, we've developed our attack plan to a point where we can do system hacking. So what is it? Well, you can't do it unless you've done those three other things first. Um, the footprinting, the scanning, and the enumeration. And you can't do it in one single pass. You want to try to attack the systems that are most susceptible, the ones that you think are most susceptible to compromise first. All right, it's what we proverbially call going after the low hanging fruit. But there may be other avenues of attack that are not so simple, where you have to look at things such as an SQL injection, a cross site scripting attack, a social engineering attack, a buffer overflow attack, etc. The other things you need to keep in the back of your heads is it's going to be very methodical. It's going to include cracking of passwords, escalating of privileges from standard user accounts, trying to infiltrate systems by implanting backdoors. It may involve malware. It may involve um, custom code, custom scripts that you write to try to inject into vulnerable systems through a buffer overflow. It will also involve how you're going to conceal that you've done it, cover your tracks that you've done it, and pushing as much documentation as you can so that you can use it later for the explanation of what you did and how you were successful. So, a word on password cracking. Password cracking, briefly, is the process of recovering a password from some sort of transmitted or stored data. You've either captured a password through its transmission via a protocol, say such as Telnet in the clear, or SSH if you can reverse engineer the encryption. And it's also a way that you can crack passwords if you get a password hash repository, such as a shadow file or a SAM file in Windows. You can crack them what they call offline. Cracking passwords while they are being transmitted is called inline cracking or brute forcing typically. And cracking passwords at your leisure that you've collected, you've farmed, so to speak, is offline cracking. So now know how to ID weak passwords. So a lot of old systems, legacy systems, are going to have default passwords. This is the easiest password to crack. Google is a good place to start. So here, let's just give a little bit of an example from something that I have seen myself. So one of the things that I used to do is I used to do a lot of work in K-12 and higher ed pen tests. And one of the things I would always find is a lot of times these organizations would have CCTV cameras. And look at that first thing there. So this is a very common type of password, or common type of camera. Let's take a step back here. Axis PTZ camera. So here's a lot of different types of cameras. And as you can see, they're not the least expensive in the world. So a lot of these cameras, all right, let's pull up a data sheet here. All right. So they're quite expensive. They have a lot of robust features, all right? And a lot of times they have onboard storage. So, and I love this, easy and reliable installation. Wonderful. So let's just take this here, Access P55, PTZ, copy, backup. Go back to our friend Google. Okay, there's a user manual. The user manual will get you typically what you need. Okay, some disclaimers. Now, a lot of times these cameras, for example, will have browser-based login, or they'll have a small operating system running in the background that's running a web server, a small Tomcat or Apache type of system, and you can go through. They have all the installation instructions. They can have a SD card as well that can go on there for additional storage. I love coming across ones that have integrated SD cards because they're really easy to inject code into. All right. So access from a browser, start a web browser. Okay, obviously you would have scanned and found the IP address of this device already. If you're layer 2 adjacent, you can probably find the MAC address as well. And then you can also use the Access IP utility, which is also an easy download. I love it. They have access from the internet as well. Okay. And it looks like this one is going to make you set the password at login. So it looks like they've gotten a little bit better with this. But a lot of times, the companies that institute these passwords, they just make it password or camera or something silly like that. The older versions will have an entire slew of passwords that are not too hard to figure out, as you can see from a lot of these FAQs. All right. So this is one of my faves to kind of go to and look at from a standpoint of pivoting into a network, because if the organization was not smart enough to put this on a private network and they make it uh, public facing, I can gain control of the camera. If it has an SD card, I can put in, um, gain access to it, set up SSH, or set up just a browser, go through a browser on the on device, do a get a DSL, damn small Linux image, and then I'm going to town. So just one example of how that system attack has to be very, very, very methodical. Hopefully, I explained that a little bit better. Other types of password cracking techniques: dictionary attacks, brute force, hybrid, syllable attacks. These are all basically different types of ways that we can try to guess a password or crack a password, either online, typically through brute force or dictionary, or offline as well. Passive online attacks. This is the ability to sniff for known vulnerabilities. So if you have a device that is sniffing traffic that is either in line to your victim, or if you've gained access to a switch and you've been able to set up a span port, a mirror port, and start collecting packets, frames on the network, that would be a type of a passive online attack. A man in the middle style attack is where you have the ability to insert yourself into the middle of a conversation or a session and typically target weak, vulnerable protocols, such as wireless. There are other tools that can help you with this, primarily SSL strip. SSL strip will work wonderfully if you can set up your own evil twin access point and get users to go through that access point to the internet instead of the legitimate access point. You can use SSL strip to strip off their TLS headers and then look at the traffic unencrypted. Burp Suite and Beef are also other really good man in the middle style of tools that you can use. They leverage proxies again, where traffic goes through your system in order for you to ascertain what's going on. Other types of password attacks: replay attacks. These are attacks where you gather information passively and then you just throw the entire stream back at a target and see what happens. I like to call it informed fuzzing. Active online. This is an aggressive form of pen testing. This is where you basically have a multitude of devices that are attacking systems simultaneously. Password guessing, a type of brute forcing, where you're just doing it manually. Malware that can be thrown at systems: Trojans, spyware, ransomware, keyloggers, other types of fuzzing attacks where you're just throwing data to try to see if there are any potential memory or buffer overflows. Hash injections, where you're throwing hashes at typically crypto to see if you can crack the crypto. And different types of, again, offline attacks, but you need to have that hash first in order to reverse the hash or crack the hash. A little bit more on hashes. These are pre-computed passwords, right? They're a fingerprint, if you will, of a password, and hashes that can be generated to see if they will trip an actual password are really good to use if they're pseudo-random. If they're pseudo-random, that typically will go against pseudo-random passwords as well. Generating rainbow tables. Rainbow tables are basically the culmination of hashes that are stored in a large file. WinRTGen is a good tool for that, and they go through creating a rainbow in exercise 7.3 in your book. Then you can go backwards and crack the rainbow, which you will see in exercise 7.4 of your book on page 299. So it's all about how much power you have, how much processing power you have. The more processing power you have, the shorter time that it's going to take for you to crack a password. Distributed networks are the best. If you have a lot of computing power in the cloud through Amazon or through Azure or your own private cloud, you can purpose many machines to crack your passwords. SETI did it. Hey, so why can't hackers? The search for extraterrestrial intelligence. They did it all the way back in the 1990s. Not to crack passwords, just to parse through data. Default passwords. I've touched on this already. Again, one of my favorites. There are a lot of different resources out there on the internet. Just find the device, look up default passwords. Some devices, especially IoT devices, they don't even have a password. You can come across their IP address or their MAC address, throw up a browser, or if you know what type of terminal emulator they're using, get right into the system right away, like it's nothing. There are other types of password theft. You can insert any type of a USB device that will inject code into a system and then look for, say, the SAM file, the shadow file. Harvest that file, and then you can pull it out very quickly and then go crack the password offline, or passwords, I should say. A lot of authentication is platform specific, especially on Microsoft. Again, know where the SAM file is located, know where the shadow file or password file in Linux is located as well, which we'll get to here in a moment. But with the SAM file, you need to change the salt configuration at install. There are tools that you can use. This is typically done with sysprep tools in Windows. If you do that, a lot of the tools, a lot of the automated cracking tools will not work on your system, even if your password, if your SAM file is ill-gottenly gained. NTLM, NT Land Manager Authentication, there are two versions depending on what version of Microsoft Windows you're running. Newer versions like 2012 and 2016 are going to run V2. Depends on what version you have at 2008. Some older versions might be V1, newer versions V2, 2003 and before are going to be V1. V2 obviously more secure than V1, but V1 is still used in some products that are still viable, like 2008. Another protocol used by Microsoft Security Support Provider is SSP, a security support provider. This is used primarily for remote access. Kerberos comes integrated with Windows, especially in Active Directory. This is how tokens are passed and users are authenticated back to the Active Directory controller. It offers a robust authentication framework. It is not 100% foolproof.